Hey guys, in all my years using Excel, I've learned quite a few secrets, and I've distilled the biggest secrets that I've learned over all these years. I've been using Excel for well over a decade now, and I've used it in every way you can imagine. I've used regular old sums, I've used functions, I've used advanced functions, I've used macros, external references, databases, well, whatever you can think of. And I've learned quite a few secrets that I'm going to share with you right here in a brief few minutes. Okay, what's the biggest secret I've learned to having successful Excel formulas that don't mess up your life? Well, the biggest secret that I've learned is to keep it simple. That's it. Okay, keep it simple. If you keep your formulas and your Excel worksheets simple, you're not going to have as many problems as you probably would have if you do what everyone else does, which is to make a complete mess out of their formulas and out of their Excel spreadsheets. The simpler your worksheets are, the simpler your formulas are, the easier your work is going to be. Because you'll be able to check that your formulas are working correctly, you'll be able to remember in 6 months what it is that your worksheet is doing, and you'll be able to detect places where things are going wrong a whole lot easier. So the biggest secret to Excel formulas, keep it simple. Keep it as simple as you can. In fact, if you can avoid using a formula altogether, avoid it. I mean, if you need to write 100, there's no reason to do a formula to write 100 for you. Just write 100 in the cell. It's that simple. Keep your worksheets as simple as possible. Okay, some additional secrets that I've learned are these. Try not to nest your functions. Okay, separate operations in a different cell. What's a nested function? Well, a nested function is one function that you put inside another one. For example, this here, this is a nested function. What it's doing is it's calculating the average of a sum of another mathematical operation. Okay, so what Excel would do is it would execute these two first, and then it would average them both. When you see something like this in a spreadsheet, that's really hard to understand. I mean, at first look, you look at this and you say, okay, what's that doing? That's doing a sum and some mathematical operation. I don't know what the heck this is. And this is the sum of a range, and it's averaging them. And in the end, it takes you 10 minutes to figure out what this thing is doing and why it's doing that and whether it's right and whether it's wrong. It's a lot easier to separate your operations in different cells and label those cells correctly. For example, I have one cell where I do the first sum. Then I have a second cell where I would do the second operation. And then I would have a third cell where I would say average these two together. So that's much easier to understand. You look at this, you say, okay, well, it's a sum from A1 to A15, okay. Then on this one, he calculates this operation, and you'd probably have a note next to the cell saying, okay, this is the result of dividing the number of days by the number of workable hours or whatever. So you'd know what this value is. And then you look at this and you say, okay, it's averaging the both values from this one and this one. Okay, and that's much easier to understand, and it's much easier to follow. If you get an error or if your numbers aren't turning out quite right, this is a lot easier to check than this. Okay, try both of these cases and see which one you have more precision on, which one you have less mistakes with, and of course wait about 6 months, then open your spreadsheet and see which one of these cases you understand better. Okay, this one or this one. Just wait 6 months and you'll see. Second tip I can give you to a great Excel formula: always double check your work. And I'm never going to get tired of telling people this. Always double check your work. I don't care how you double check, okay? You might simply take a calculator, one of those $5 calculators, and add a couple numbers together to see that they're more or less what you're getting on your Excel spreadsheet. Or you can go cell by cell checking that everything is right, that the formulas are right, and so on. But always double check your work. Whichever way you prefer of double checking, double check. Don't just believe what Excel tells you. And like I said before in a previous chapter, if you don't believe me, go ask JP Morgan or go ask whatever hundreds of thousands of companies have lost money, and I'm talking real money here, thousands, hundreds of thousands, even millions of dollars, because something messed up in their Excel formulas. Okay? Excel is currently categorized as one of the biggest financial risks in the world. Why? Precisely because people believe up front what it says without questioning where it's coming from. So always double check your work, and if something doesn't seem right, find out why it's not right. Okay? Don't just believe that it's right because Excel says so. Okay, third tip, always label your columns and rows correctly. Whenever you're doing a spreadsheet, don't do something like this, okay? Because someone looks at this and they see this as a date, okay, great. But what's this? 0 to 23, is that a day? Is that a server number? Is that a line number? Is that an employee code or what? What is it? I mean, I could assume that these are hours, but I can't be completely sure. So always label your rows and columns correctly. Instead of doing something like this, find another way to label it, or simply say hours of the day, like that. And then you just center this like this, do it like that, and there. Okay, that's much easier to understand. You know this is the date, you know this is the hour of the day, and of course it says average system load values, so you know these are load values during different times of day. So always label your columns and rows correctly. That's essential to understanding a worksheet, to having other people also understand the worksheet, and to being able to understand it in 6 months when you can't remember what it is you did on it. Next tip, avoid leaving operations on the side. What do I mean by operations on the side? I mean this, okay? I'm looking at these numbers here and I'm saying this one doesn't seem right, so I'm going to fix it right there. And what I think I'll do is I'll average these together. Let's see, the last three values are that. And so I'm going to do this 0.56. Maybe I'll add a little bit to it, 0.57. And that's the value. Okay, that's what I mean by an operation on the side. You do an operation here on the margin, you leave the operation, and maybe you even make the mistake of referencing this operation on the side. That's a bad habit. Why? Because number one, you have no idea what it is you did here. And other people will have absolutely no idea. I mean, if you have no idea, other people have even less of an idea of what it is you see here. And believe me, in my time, I've seen hundreds and hundreds of worksheets for things really complicated where people have done this. They made all kinds of calculations on the side, a number here, they calculated another number here, another one here. They wrote something down here, they wrote something over here, and they reference it all in a spreadsheet, and in the end, it's impossible to look at. If you're going to do something like this, it's all right, you can do your calculations, but then transfer the value here, set the value to a fixed value, and just delete this thing, you know. And if necessary, add a comment right here, which says edited value, too high, averaged, last values. And that's a whole lot clearer than writing something here on the margin. Another reason, and a very important reason at that, why you should never do this, write things down on the side and then reference them inside your calculations, is because of this. Let's say that I did that. And 2 days later, someone is finishing this up, they enter their data, they look at this and they say, okay, that doesn't seem to be doing anything, delete it. And I get an error message right there. See? But they don't notice that this error message is here and they send off the worksheet. And it turns out that you sent off a worksheet with an error in one of the cells, and the numbers are now probably wrong, and the formulas are probably wrong, and everything goes wrong from then on. So that's another very important reason not to make calculations on the side of your spreadsheet. Do your calculations like you're supposed to inside the spreadsheet. Keep a standard format, keep a standard order. Use comments and formulas to give meaning to special numbers, which is what we just saw here. In other words, if you have a number which has a special meaning attached to it, add a comment, okay? This number has been altered. And that way, in 3 months or in 2 days, when someone looks at it, they'll know that the number was altered. And they'll know who to ask why the number was altered. And when they come to ask you, you'll be able to look at here and say, oh, yeah, this was unusually high, so I average these three together. I mean, when you're handling 20, 30 worksheets per day about different subjects, you're not going to remember in 2 days what it is you did on a spreadsheet. So do yourself a favor and use comments and use formulas to give special meaning to numbers. Now, what exactly do I mean by special meaning to numbers? If I have 0.36 in a cell, well, that's a decimal number, and well, it's a number, and a number is a number, and if I look at it 6 months from now, I'm probably not going to be able to figure out how I came to this number. But if instead this number is like this, equals 0.18 plus 0.36 minus 0.18, and in 6 months I come across this cell and I see this sum, I'll know that at least this number has a special meaning to it. And normally I'll be able to remember, okay, 0.18 was the value that I read on the server at that time. This one came from the server logs, and I subtracted this one because there was an error which I needed to correct, and that's how I got to 0.36. And if someone asks me in a while, why is this 0.36, I can normally figure it out from this formula. Whereas if I just step into the cell and see this, well, I'm not going to have much of an explanation for that. So use comments and explain your formulas as much as possible. Avoid referencing other workbooks, what's called an external link. An external link is when you have this workbook and you have another workbook open in Excel as well, and you create a formula from this workbook to the other workbook. That's called an external link. And the external link allows you to transfer values from the other workbook to your workbook. We saw it at the very start when we talked a little bit about error messages. But that's not such a good idea. Why? Because if someone alters the other workbook without you knowing it, your values in your workbook can change. Or if someone deletes it or something else happens, you can very easily get errors inside your worksheet and not even be aware that there's a problem. So avoid referencing other workbooks whenever possible. External links, Excel has them, and they're an accepted way of using Excel, but I don't know. I don't like to do it precisely because of the huge margin for error that you generate by using external links. Avoid huge chained sums. Use sum instead. Okay, there's nothing more annoying than when you come across a spreadsheet where someone did this. They simply start adding a bunch of values together. Okay, there's nothing more annoying than seeing this in an Excel spreadsheet. I mean, how can somebody take the time to add number by number by number? Okay, don't do that. That's extremely hard to understand, and it's also extremely error prone. If you miss a number here, or if you duplicate a number, your formula is gone, your sum has a wrong value, and you're going to get a wrong result. And duplicating a value is easy. I mean, it's as easy as this. If I accidentally type Z20 again and I clicked on it, look, here's Z20, and here's Z20 again. And Z20 is twice in my result, and I didn't even notice it. So don't do that, okay? Don't use these huge chains of sums. And what's even worse, don't use these huge chains of sums across several worksheets, because I've seen lots of people that start adding here, then they add a value from here, then they add a value from here, then another one from here, then another one from here, and in the end you end up with a chain of 15 sums referencing different worksheets that you have no idea where it's going. Okay, so don't do that. Keep all your numbers on one spreadsheet and use the sum function, okay? Excel has a sum function, which is exactly what this is for. And even if you're saying, well, I don't need all these values, still use the sum function and then subtract the two values that you don't want to include in your calculation. This is way easier to understand than a whole bunch of additions there. And finally, the last tip that I can give you, use macros only as a last resort. We're going to talk a little bit about macros in the very end of this tutorial, but you'll probably find that along the way you come across macros that other people have made, or other people say, well, why don't you solve that with a macro? Or someone comes to your office and says, guess what, I'm going to give a course on macros, it's only $300 and you'll be able to solve everything in 5 minutes. Okay, use macros only as a last resort. They're really useful, but they're really complicated and they're prone to errors, so I don't like them a whole lot. They're really great if you know how to use them, but if you're not quite sure, they're not so great. So remember, macros only as a last resort in Excel. But overall, the most important tip I can give you for your Excel formulas, keep it simple, okay? As long as you keep it simple, you're going to make your life in Excel a whole lot easier, and you're going to make your calculations a whole lot more precise and correct. Thanks for watching this video tutorial. If you liked the video, be sure to subscribe to our channel and to visit our website, cubicleoverlords.com, for more instructional videos like this one.